I just had this motor apart last year to work on, I replaced this coil and a bunch of other stuff I was working on. And I had this engine all cleaned out, and I even put peppermint oil, which is supposed to repel rodents. But look at this. And I use this during the winter. It's not like it sits all winter abandoned. It gets used in the winter more than the summer. And they rebuilt this nest. I saw it in the winter. There's a hole on the side here, a big vent hole. And I picked everything out that I could from that hole. And then later in the winter, I saw, actually the fall, it was, or spring I should say, it was all full again. And like I said, I use this in the winter quite a bit. It doesn't sit idle all winter. It has to blow snow. It's actually its biggest job. I only cut the lawn 4 or 5 times a year up here. And snow blow more than that, but snow blowing is a pretty big task. It's pretty hard in this mower. This is kind of undersized for the job. Got a real long driveway. Well, I got most of it out with a screwdriver and a wire that I can get way down in here, but there's some stuff that's sitting in here. Hopefully some of the stuff will blow out on its own, but I don't want to, well, I got it all open, I want to get rid of what I can. So, I got loose what I can get loose. I'm going to get the shop vac and see if I can suction out this area, and maybe in here a little bit too, and around the shroud. It tends to stick by the shroud real dense. This wire is pretty good for that. I can reach in there and make sure it's all clear. But it packs, you got it all packed in. Yep, still getting more up. Thought I had this all out of here. What a mess. So a simple idea, just putting nuts through. I actually put glue on the back of this one that's loose. The other one's I put glue on too, but it actually holds real tight by itself into the plastic. This is the hole I had the that I was tapped into with the one that holds the ground down. The other hole's stripped, more or less. So it's really a bad way to hold the ground. You know, they've got ground cushions going to this regulator, and the only pressure they had on it was just a screw going into plastic. This way I've got metal to metal, and I can get as much tension as I want on them. And just a note, the regulator sits about here, so I could go with a lot longer fins into that area, and actually I could actually go into this area with a larger heat sink. Some room in there too. Just notes. At one time I put 2 fairly heavy Zerner diodes in parallel across the light here, just to protect my light bulbs from what I thought was just a transient surge that was destroying them, you know, because I put 2 15-volt 1 amp Zerners in, or whatever they were, 1 watt probably, actually. Nowhere near an amp. At any rate, I figured, it's just going to be transient noise spikes. Those diodes will handle that fine. Of course, I should have put a resistor in series ahead of the Zerners, and I wouldn't have blown the Zerners, but yeah, they smoked. No time flat. Should never hit 15 volts. 15 is just too much. And this thing climbs way above 15, of course. But recently, when I was running it with the little voltmeter I installed, it was mostly behaving really nicely, but then there was one episode where it went up to 15 volts. Well, actually above 15 volts. I think it even touched 16 briefly. So that's unacceptable. That'll ruin my LEDs. So I'm going to try it now with the ground even more secure. And now that I got a way to monitor the situation with this panel meter, I hope. It was doing some bizarre flashing. That's the other reason I had the panel meter tied to the other side, where it's not as tight though. Now both sides are going to be tight, so we'll see. So I'm going to monitor it for a while, see if it actually does mount, regulate okay, and if not, I'm going to go back to putting my circuit in. But I'll need a heatsink that can mount in here somehow. Use this windage in here. And now I'm mostly back together. This is my extra regulator. You can see the original regulator is just held in. The original mounting bolts were just these little threading into the self-threading plastic screws. Now I've got two studs coming out. And I got a lot of tension on both of these. And I'll be able to see if it regulates any better this way. I'd recommend doing this to any of these lawnmowers though. This is a really dumb idea using one of these. 4 threaded 8mm bolts can all go in fairly tight. None of these can be reefed because you're pressing plastic against metal. Obviously you'll smash the plastic at some point if you start reefing them. You don't want them to shake loose on the other hand. The bigger 10mm bolts actually go into clips. So they can't be that tight. Kind of get them as tight as you can where you feel they're not going to shake loose. But they're basically, most of them are going to Tinnerman nuts. I'm going to have to buy some new Tinnerman nuts. I don't know how I'll size that. Maybe my local hardware will be able to help me. The Dublin General Store has everything. Not, but they might. So yeah, be careful with the 10mm ones. The one on the filler, the one right next to it, which on mine is kind of spent. And this one too will pop if you go too tight. I shouldn't have used this thin wire either for my gauge, but I like the outer jacket of it, and I got tons of that telephone crap. But really, it's going to end up breaking if I'm... if it wasn't for myself, I wouldn't use it. It's not going to be very reliable. So I'm going to run it a few times and see how it goes.